Attorneys general from 15 states have sent a letter to Governor Mills, Maine Attorney General Aaron Frey, and legislative leaders saying they will take action against Maine if a bill to protect transgender patients and Maine providers traveling to the state for medical care passes. LD 227 would protect patients and healthcare providers in the state who perform abortions or provide in vitro fertilization that is illegal in other states. A clause in the bill would also safeguard providers and patients from out-of-state laws surrounding transgender medical care. The letter claims the bill violates the U.S. Constitution and goes against the federalist structure that allows each state to engage in self-government. Frey responded to the letter saying he was, quote, thoroughly dismayed. He says his office has reviewed the bill and is confident it will hold up to legal challenges, noting the limitations on the extent by which a state must honor a judgment from another state.